So this week we're going to be digging into Casey Anthony, and this is a case I introduced to you, and I find it a terribly fascinating sociological experiment. This case, it's an interesting one because Casey Anthony. This is a very famous case, and just to give you a quick outline for anybody who's new to the Casey Anthony case. Casey Anthony is a young girl. This was in, I think, 2008, who had a daughter. And once her daughter turned 3, 4, she told her parents, listen, I've got some work trips I'm going on, Tampa Bay, Jacksonville, and I'm going to be away. I'm going to take the daughter away, and we'll catch up with you in a bit. And over the course of a month, Kaylee, which is her daughter, and Casey are just not at the house, or not being, and the grandparents aren't seeing their granddaughter. They keep asking, can we speak to Kaylee? Is can you bring her around? No, there's always one excuse or another, until eventually it gets to the point in early July 2008 where Casey's mother, Kaylee's grandmother, finds Casey, demands to see Kaylee. Casey says she's with the nanny, and it then transpires that actually 30 days ago, the nanny had taken Kaylee, and she was trying to find her. So the mother then calls 911. The police come around, and Casey is pretty much saying, look, I didn't go to the cops. I was using my own resources. And this is kind of where we're at. And the thing that we're going to be looking at today is we're going to be looking at, the perspective of the mother and the father, Cindy and George Anthony. We're going to be looking at it from the perspective of Casey and her story. And we're going to be looking at it also from the perspective of what she told the police and how the police were introduced to this case. But this case was new to you, wasn't it, Dixon?
Well, I mean, it was new in the sense that I had never really spent much time looking at. Of course, you couldn't, if you live in the United States, and I assume many people who might be watching this might do the same, it was impossible in 2008 not to have heard of this case just by osmosis, by being in the culture. But for me, I was in graduate school. The Phillies were busy marching their way to the winning the World Series. I was getting married in August of 16th of 2008. Yeah. So, it was something that, like, if you're flipping the channels, essentially back then on TV, you could not hear about it, especially because it was also an election year. And so I would watch the news and stuff because of, that was the year Barack Obama was running for his first term against John McCain. So there was reason for me to be tuned into news programs, and it would come up, but I don't know, for whatever reason, it's not something I ever spent any time on.
So the one thing I like about this case, it's a murder case. It's a very depressing thing. But the thing that I find most intriguing about this case is the behavior of Casey Anthony. And one thing that we're going to be discussing at some point is she did have 2 fairly thorough psychological analyses or reviews, and both of which determined she was of sound mind. And it's very hard to grasp that she was of sound mind given her behavior. And what I want to do is review really what happened from her perspective, and really sort of tap into what she was thinking, or trying to understand what she was thinking.
Maybe this is jumping ahead, but can I ask you just a question in that? Yeah. Which is, when you say that for you it's difficult to grasp that she's of sound mind, I mean, do you think it's that she's crazy, or do you think it's that she is like sociopathic?
I struggle with the idea that she's not got some sort of, and again, we've said this many times before, I'm not a psychologist, but
neither am I.
She to me seems to have some sort of element of sociopathy, or the way she can disassociate herself. I was saying to my wife, she is a Jedi mindfulness. I don't know how to describe it. She's a Jedi master at mindfulness, because everything in every interview she's in, she is, she was tried in a death penalty case, and she was smiling and she was happy in interviews. It was almost as if the whole death penalty thing and the case really weren't in her mind in the here and now, when she was talking about her hair, or she was talking about how her parents are doing. And that's what mindfulness kind of is. It's kind of forgetting all the things that stress you out and focus on how comfortable you are now, how, you're not hungry, you're not begging for anything. And she is a Jedi master of mindfulness, or she's sociopathic.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's just a question to leave open as we explore this case. In doing the investigation, that I know we're going to continue that deep dive over the next several weeks, but obviously to be seated here today, I've done more reading about the case and preparing around the case than I ever had before. And I think it's an interesting one to follow up with Darlie Routier. I mean, these are two kids, or Routier, two kids,
Yeah.
two women, young women, who stand accused of murdering their children. One convicted, one not. And there's a lot of the same types of questions at play. And one of them, frankly, is, and it's like a little area of interest of mine, and one of the things I think we'll probably talk about as we go forward is that question of reasonable doubt and how that gets formed or fails to get formed, and what it even means as you're trying to put this together. So I think it's an interesting case, again, for analyzing not just Casey Anthony as a psyche or as an individual human being, but also the psychology of juries and trials and how these things, how we know what we think we know, epistemology itself almost.
I think that the reasonable doubt thing, we talked about it with Darlie Routier, and I think this, with Darlie Routier, I think it was a little bit easier to talk about reasonable doubt, more so than this case, because the circumstantial evidence in this case and the behavior is a little bit more, and it's unusual for me to say it's more unusual than Darlie Routier. Darlie Routier was extremely unusual in her behavior, but the I guess the juxtaposition of her behavior versus what she was experiencing is just so nice. It's hard to comprehend that she's able to behave the way she is given what is happening to her. And
sure,
this is,
of course, that in itself kind of constructs towards the reasonable doubt. I think if you're somebody who voted not, well, I mean, there's only 12 people who did, but if you're thinking in terms of the jury, how could they have arrived at that verdict? I think part of it is the complete break between here's what's actually happening to you, Casey Anthony, and here's your set of behaviors. So and I agree that there's a real disconnect between those two things. The funny thing is, I thought you were going to say that Darlie, that it's easier to have the conversation around reasonable doubt with Darlie because her situation is slightly more believable than Casey Anthony's, or her story, her version of events. And actually, I would agree with that statement. And yet she's in prison and Casey's not.
Well, and I think that is what I was alluding to, because I find that it's Darlie Routier at least went through the motions. So let's say Darlie Routier is sociopathic. She wanted to make sure that she was showing you that she was genuinely concerned about her children, whereas Casey Anthony just said the words, but everything in her behavior and her mannerisms would indicate she really didn't care that much. And that's where I think there's a bit more of a challenge in making a reasonable doubt case with Casey Anthony versus Darlie Routier.
And which is what makes it interesting, because again, that both of them stood trial, and that's the same standard that they both faced. And I would tend to agree with you that I think Darlie's case for reasonable doubt is stronger by a pretty wide margin, frankly, than Casey Anthony's, and yet
she's out. She's free. So let's take a look at what's happened from the perspective of Cindy and George. So that's her parents. So her parents on, it was June the 16th, said goodbye to Kaylee for the last time. Casey had this sort of backstory that she was working for Universal and she had to do some business trips for Universal, which that in itself is a questionable thing. I don't know
in Tampa, that's the hilarious part of it. Like what Universal Studios, our famous second backlot in Tampa. What the
we need you to go to Jacksonville and Tampa Bay.
Jacksonville's even better.
There's some shit going on there that we need you to scope out, Casey.
Jacksonville, I think, is Florida to Floridians. You know how the rest of the country feels about Florida. That's how, like, that's where Michael Dunn happens, and
So there's a few cases in that area because I'm starting to recognize roads from
Orlando. Oh God! Well, you know what? That one I want to do some other time. Tommy Ziegler, Florida again. It's an amazing place.
Always Florida. Casey and Kaylee are off and out and about now. Over the course of the next month, Kaylee's mother is, it's clear that Cindy and George love Kaylee. They absolutely adore Kaylee, and she's a big part of that family dynamic. She's been gone with Casey, who's been on these business trips with the like one of the family cars. It's not a family car. It's a Pontiac Sunbird, I think, or it's something to that effect. It's a Pontiac, piece of shit Pontiac that she has, that her brother had, that she's driving all over Florida with on these business trips. Now, over the course of, I think, about 3 or 4 weeks, Casey's been giving excuses as to why she can't come over. She's been giving excuse coming home with Kaylee, why she can't put Kaylee on the phone. She's never in the same room with Kaylee. And it gets to about 3 to 4 weeks in, and Cindy is getting quite concerned, as is George, but Cindy's leading the charge. Cindy learns how to text, which she, I guess, hadn't been doing before, and starts to really hammer, with Casey, just to say, hey, listen, we really want to see you. So July 5th rolls around, and Casey's not around, and again, they're chasing Casey. And they finally get a hold of her, I think, a few days later. And leading up to about the 13th, 14th, 15th, she says, well, I will be home, but I need to go to Jacksonville. She had said that she had a wealthy boyfriend named Jeff, and her and Jeff were going to go to Jacksonville to see a friend of theirs who was getting married. She was dying of cancer. It was at a hospital. It was like an impromptu wedding. So my guess is it's sort of a deathbed wedding.
Man,
he's very big in
this story. This story is total bullshit, right?
Yes.
There's top to bottom. I mean, the idea that it's just like the level of detail and the, you know what I mean, like the drama. I mean, boy, she's really she's got a Days of Our Lives thing going on here. We got deathbed weddings and.
Well, the thing I find fascinating, and this is something that when you talk, when you listen to a lot of people who are, let's say, interrogators or, people that are trained in catching out lies, it's the details that start to make you question whether someone's being honest. So her mother's saying, okay, we're expecting her home soon. Now, while she's home, on the 10th, she gets, and she knows that Casey has the car. So somewhere on, the 14th, I think it's the 14th or 15th. Now, the everything sort of unfolds 14th, 15th, and 16th. On the 14th, I believe, they notice that there's a note in the door. It's a certified letter. They don't necessarily know what it is. And George has to go to the post office to pick it up and to see what it's about. And then George goes, and I believe this is on the 14th or 15th, and he finds out that actually the car they thought Casey was in has been impounded. So they contact Casey and they say, listen, you need to come home right now. There's some shit going down. We don't know what's going on. We haven't seen Kaylee. We haven't seen you. You need to come home now, which Casey agrees to come home. So that day, George can't pick up the car on his own. He needs to have the two registered owners of the car, which is the mother and father. George goes back, picks up Cindy, and goes to the impound yard in Orlando to pick up the car. So Cindy's waiting in the car. George goes to pick up the car, and he notices a pungent odor. So George was a deputy sheriff, I believe, in Ohio. He's got experience with the smell of decomposition and dead bodies. George says this smells like somebody has died. And I think they're putting one and two together because they haven't seen Kaylee, and the car smells like decomposing flesh. So he goes over to Cindy and says, listen, just go home. I'm going to follow you home. We need to get home now. From what I understand, on the way home, he called Lee Anthony, that's Casey's brother, said, you need to come home now. And when they get home, the mother, Cindy Anthony, notes that the car just reeks. She even says it smells like a dead body. It smells awful. The car smells so bad that she has to take action on it. She tells George to go back to work, and she starts to open the trunk, all of the doors. She's looking through it. She sees Kaylee's backpack. She sees Casey's purse, some shoes, and there's a bag in the back, a garbage bag in the back. She had to use a whole can of Febreze, and the Febreze didn't work to the point that she had to put dryer sheets throughout the car to try to make it smell fresh and leave the doors open. I mean, to put that much effort into it tells me that this is a notable thing, and now they're worried. So eventually, they can't get a hold of Casey. Cindy goes back to work, and her employer says, look, just go home. She was trying to finish a project, and her mind wasn't quite on it. She's really worried about Kaylee now. When she goes home, she looks into Casey's purse, and she sees that there's resumes there, resumes for her friend Amy. So she doesn't know what possesses her to do this, but she calls Amy. Amy picks up the phone, and she says, look, we haven't seen Kaylee in over a month. We need to see Casey. Amy agrees to meet her at the Florida Mall, I think she said, and take her straight to where Casey is, which is at her boyfriend's house, Tony, not Jeff, the rich guy who doesn't exist. So she goes straight up, takes her to Tony, says, Casey, you need to come with me now. Casey says, okay, I need to come back eventually. Can I go back to the apartment after I come back? Not really worried about the kid at this stage. So on the way back from Tony's to her house, she says, "Where's Kaylee?" Kaylee's at the nanny's. So this is when Zanny the nanny comes in. So Ed's in Ida's house. Can we go see her tomorrow? No, I want to see Kaylee now. Where is Kaylee? No, I'm not going to take you. She's at the nanny's. We're not going to bother Kaylee. We'll go pick her up tomorrow. She said, "What do you mean we'll pick her up tomorrow? I haven't seen my granddaughter in over a month, or in about a month."
Right.
She gets so annoyed that she drives to a police substation. The door, it's locked. So the police station's locked. She calls the number, I think, on the door, and she said, "Look, I need to get a hold of somebody." At one point, I think she made 3 calls on this day to 911 and to the police. At one point, she's threatening to have her daughter arrested for stealing her car. And I forget what the other piece is, but she's threatening to have her daughter arrested. Couldn't get a hold of the police. They said, "Look, go home, call 911. So she goes home, she calls 911, and Casey's just saying, "Look, she's at the nanny's." And the thing I find interesting here, and I couldn't really find detail, while she was calling the police and parked at the police substation, Casey's just playing hardball. She's just, the only thing I can surmise from this is she's just sitting there quietly, just saying, "This is stupid. She's at the nanny's." That's my best guess. So they're at the house, and she calls the police. She says, "Look, can you send somebody over?" And eventually they say they're going to send somebody over. Now, this is taking longer than Cindy wants, and Cindy is starting to really freak out. She's getting really annoyed because the police aren't here. And while she's pacing around the house, her son, Casey's brother Lee, is there speaking to Casey in her room, where she overhears as she's walking into the room, Casey saying, "Zanny actually took Kaylee a month ago, and I've been looking for her for the last month." Cindy goes batshit crazy. She's swearing, yelling at Casey, just absolutely going nuts. And that's when they call 911 straight away. And I've queued up the point in the 911 call where they pass the phone over to Casey. Would you like to hear that?
Sure, please.
Well, can you tell me what's going on a little bit? I'm sorry? Can you tell me a little bit what's going on? My daughter's been missing for the last 31 days. And you know who has her? I know who has her. I've tried to contact her. I actually received a phone call today, now from a number that is no longer in service. I did get to speak to my daughter for about a minute. Okay, did you guys call and report a vehicle stolen? Yes, my mom did. Yep. Okay, so there's been a vehicle stolen too? No, this was my vehicle. What vehicle was stolen? The 98 Pontiac Sunfire. Okay, I have deputies on the way to you right now for that. So now your 3-year-old, your 3-year-old daughter is missing. Kaylee Anthony. Yes. White female. Anthony. Yes, white female. 3 years old, 8/9/2005 is her date of birth? Yes. And you last saw her a month ago? 31 days. From 31 days. Who has her? Do you have a name? Her name is Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. Who is that? Babysitter? She's been my nanny for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years. And why are you calling now? Why didn't you call 31 days ago?
So that is the 911 call where everything just kicks off. So I guess any thoughts from your perspective? I mean, that is pretty much the rundown from the perspective of the family up to the point they call the police.
Well, first of all, she says that she got a phone call from the nanny today. The number is also no longer in service.
Yeah.
Have you ever? Do you think that's possible? That's not possible.
She does address this because I read this somewhere. So she said to the police later that day that she got a call from a private number, but in the interview with the police, she said, "I only spoke with Kaylee. I know she's alive and well and happy," but then they hung up the phone. It was a private number.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter what she says later when she's had time to think up the story or smooth out the details. What matters is right there. She says, "I got a call from today and now the number is no longer in service. I mean, she's obviously making it up as she goes along. I mean, we know this because of what we know about the end.
Yeah.
But I mean, I say obvious now. But even at the time, if I were listening to that, like that jump, I had never heard that phone call before. That jumped right out at me. What do you mean you got a phone call today from a number that is now no longer in service? I mean, like,
yeah, for me, the thing that jumped out at me early doors was she said that. So from her perspective now, one of the things that we're going to go into, when she was speaking to the police, she said that she, when she went to pick up her daughter, the day that she went missing,
yeah,
nobody was at the door, and then I called Zanny's number, and it was out of service. Now, I don't know of any cell phone company that will turn off a phone within a day. Even if you were to call them and say, listen, I want to end my plan. Can you disable my phone? They're not going to be like, oh, right away. I'll just push a button and it'll be off.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The story makes no sense. Also, she's saying, well, I've been searching for her for the last 31 days. My daughter's been missing for 31 days. I mean, we know, of course, she doesn't necessarily, she's talking to a 911 operator, so I don't know what she knows the 911 operator knows. But you were picked up from your boyfriend's place, and as I understand it, you were toking when they found you. Mm-hmm. This is not looking. You know what I mean? That you didn't call, you're not looking. You're saying things that don't make any sense, that clearly could not have happened because they don't happen that way for anyone anywhere. I mean, it's right off the bat. It's just, like this is cockamamie. This is cockamamie nonsense.
So, when the police came, she gave a statement, and she goes through the story about where Zanny lives. So, and I heard an interesting thing, about Zanny. I heard somebody say Zanny the nanny, because I don't know if this is true, but some parents or some less than aspiring parents would use Xanax to, almost like whiskey on the gums, as they did sort of in the 70s, early mid 70s, to keep a kid quiet. Mm-hmm. She would go to Zanny the nanny's house on that day, and she said that, I knocked on the door. This is what she told police. I knocked on the door. There was no answer. I called, and Zanny's number wasn't working. I was freaking out. So I went to the park, and I went to a couple of the stores that she normally goes to. I couldn't find her. So I decided I'm going to go to neutral territory, and I went to my boyfriend's because I didn't know what to say to my parents that I lost my daughter. So that was her plan. That was her story. But
she obviously had no plans to talk to her parents at all.
No.
Right.
She and the police said, "Oh, well, did you mention to Tony, your boyfriend, that that your kid has gone missing? Pretty major thing." And she said, "Nope, didn't mention it to Tony. Did you mention it to any of his roommates? Nope, didn't mention it to them either. I thought I would try to find her myself." So that was her big plan going forward. So the police said, okay, just tell me. And they asked about Zanny's apartment. They asked about where she lived.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Can you narrate that story for us?
Yes. Can you? So where Zanny lives? Great. So, and where did you meet Zanny? And okay, so how did you get to know Zanny? Well, I worked with this guy named Jeff, and Jeff had a kid, and it was actually Jeff's nanny. And Jeff was kind enough to let me have free nanny services. So. She would watch Jeff's kid and my kid, and they played together. It was beautiful. It was awesome. But I met him working at Universal Studios. So the police spend the next 24 hours checking all of this shit out. They're just looking into names. They go to Zanny's place. They find out that the apartment that she said Zanny lived in had been abandoned or not lived in for about 4 months. So nobody had lived in it. Not only that, they actually had CCTV that they could watch people coming and going. Even one camera focused on the window, she said was Kaylee's bedroom when she was there. So nobody was in or out, not even Zanny or Kaylee had never been there.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, okay, maybe we're getting this wrong. So they said, Kaylee, take us to the apartment. Show us where it is. So Kaylee takes them to the apartment. Says, here's the apartment. And they're like, that's the apartment. She said, yep, that's the apartment. Okay, all right. Okay, how about this? Where did you meet Jeff? Let's show us where Jeff works. Show us where you work. So she takes them to Universal. Now she had worked at Universal, I think at one point in time, very briefly, and she worked. I think she was selling pictures for the Incredible Hulk ride. She wasn't an event coordinator who was doing business trips to Tampa Bay and Jacksonville.
Well, every time, I know when I go to Universal Studios Orlando, I can't wait to take the little satellite run up to Jacksonville when I go for their, park that they have up there, well, anyway.
I've never been to Universal, to be fair.
I've never been either.
No.
But I've been to Disney World. There's no satellite park. What the heck? Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god.
It would be the dumbest place to put a satellite park in the same state a few hours away.
Yeah.
So she then, and this is why I think she's a Jedi of mindfulness, because she then took the police to Universal, walked them it was about a 15-20 minute walk all the way through these offices, and turns around and laughs and says, yep, I don't work here. And the police are just besides themselves. They are now, and they knew that she didn't work there. They knew that there was no Jeff working there. She even referred to another person a mutual friend of theirs named Juliette Lewis, not the actress, maybe it was the actress, who was a person that didn't even exist. And from there, the police, I have a bit of a transcript of what the police had said to her. So they said, so why didn't you call prior today? And she said, I think part of me was naive enough to think that I could handle this myself, which obviously I can't. And I was scared that something would happen to her if I did notify the authorities or got media involved, or my parents, which I know would have done the same thing. Just the fear of the unknown, fear of the potential, Kaylee getting hurt, of not seeing my daughter again. So they say, I've gone to every address you've told me. I've looked up every name. I've talked to every person you wanted me to try to talk to. And in this interview with the police, now they're interviewing her at Universal Studios because they're like, all right, this is bullshit. We're going to talk now because the sworn statement you gave us has been full of shit. So they're speaking to there, and throughout the whole interview, she's just answering, If you read the transcript, I think she says it about 30 or 40 times. And a lot of the time she's just nodding, going, She's giving nothing, which is actually quite clever if you're trying not to spill the beans as far as how naughty you are.
Sure.
So now we're going to wrap up part one here pretty soon. But part two, what I want to do is go through the minute by minute, day by day, as much as we have, because I've gathered evidence of every single day that Casey has moved around from June the 16th through to July the 16th. And I want to analyze what she was actually doing on those days.
Sure. I mean, you're right. I will say you're hearing the transcript of that interview. And I've read the summary, but not the specific transcript. That she has, it would seem, that she has something like ice water in the veins, as they say, like a good athlete has, the ability not to be affected by any pressure. But I mean, again, this goes back, and I don't, the question that we have been asking about is she, to me, this is all evidence of sociopathic behavior. Because somebody who can just lie as a matter of course, and who has no emotional response to being caught. No, and really what it is it's no fear. Yeah. And it's funny, I just happened to be listening to a podcast this past week about, it was actually from This American Life, which is done by, it's a sort of a spin-off, if you want to call it that, of NPR. And this week's episode was about sociopaths, like actual out and out sociopaths. And one of the things that they were talking about is like really what it's associated with is the lack of fear response. And I never really thought about it in those terms. I thought of it as like sort of deadened, lack of emotion, failure, no empathy is the classic thing you hear. But all of that starts, like if you have no fear, like just, it's no fear, right? It's just that there's a sense of that there are no consequences. I'm going to do something, and if it doesn't work, then I'll just switch strategies. That's all. Like that there's, and that the fact that I'm talking to police officers that my child is missing, that since I've just been lying straight through ceaselessly for the last 2 days, and all of that has come unraveled. Like it was sort of an opening gambit, and it's not going to work. A normal person would start to think to themselves, "Oh shit, they're onto me," and now the wheels would start to turn. That they're onto me. I've got problems here. Better. Whatever. It seems like she just switches strategies without being phased at all, and that is signs of sociopath. And I'm not a psychiatrist, but
no, it's not even. There's no strategy. I think there's just no. Her mind seems incapable of thinking 2 steps behind or 2 steps ahead. She's and she's apparently not stupid.
No, she doesn't seem stupid.
But she lives her life, it seems, much like a goldfish. Whereas, a goldfish, they don't know what's happened before, and they're not thinking about what's happening in the next 10 minutes. And she's just living moment to moment, and just, I'll deal with it the second it comes up. I'm just, in my mind, what I find fascinating is what was going on in her mind as she was walking the 15 to 20 minutes, trying to come up with the next move from there. It's either she's so optimistic that she's gonna, something's gonna happen. Like they're gonna get a call that there's, some terrorist attack or something, and the police are gonna be like, "You stay here, Casey. We have to sort something out." I have no idea what's going on in her head to think something's gonna come. Something's gonna come and save Casey. Come on, God. I have no idea.
Well, you know what I'm thinking to an extent. Have you ever seen the Seinfeld episode where George is going out with his would-have-been in-laws, but of course his fiancee Susan died in one episode, and so he has told them he has a place in the Hamptons, which is of course a lie, because he's trying to prove he's trying to prove them that money's not important to them, and they're like, "Oh, let's go," and he's like, "Okay, sure."
Here I am, ready to take you to the Hamptons.
Sounds grand.
Do you have your bathing suits? It's March. Speak now, or we are headed to the Hamptons. It's a 2-hour drive. Once you get in that car, we are going all the way.
And like they just keep going. Like he's not willing to back down, and they're not willing to let him get away with it. So they get into the car, they start driving out Long Island, and it's like this. It's this showdown. Like I'm not going to give up this fiction until. Finally, I think at the end of the episode, he's obviously, like Casey Anthony, he's finally boxed in, and he's not going to be able to get away with it, so he has to admit the truth. And of course, they say, "Well, we knew that all along." He's like, "Well, then why'd you make me drive all the way out to the Hamptons?" It's just like this kind of game that's being played.
If she had a Seinfeld DVD of that episode, then we know she's guilty, because that is the playbook that she's working off of.
Well,
that is circumstantial.
And you remember George's most famous line, right? Remember, Jerry, it's not a lie if you believe it. And I believe that encapsulates Casey Anthony as much as anything.
Well, that's a good point, I think, for us to wrap up part 1. We're going to be picking up part 2, where we are going to be going through the day-to-day movings of Casey Anthony from June the 16th up into this point. And then we're going to start digging into the trial and then the verdict. So if you do want to comment, please do. We did get some comments on Darlie Rudier. We want to start adding these into the show. Please, if you're listening, if you've put up with us this long, please subscribe to the channel. Please join us. We are going to be going live on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Twitch. And we're going to be putting these up on YouTube. And hopefully in the next week, we're going to have a podcast link that we can share with you as well. So again, Dixon, thank you so much this week. Looking forward to catching up with you with part 2 next week.
Sounds wonderful.
To everybody else, thank you so much. And more of Casey Anthony next week. In the comments, let us know what you think about her movings beforehand, before the next video, and we'll read them out.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you, everybody. Take care and have a good week.